Hi, everybody. So we're going to get started now. Just to introduce myself first, my name is Kai. My pronouns are they, them, or really any pronouns will do. And I'm here with Wei. We are both quite new to organizing. And we are here because, well, we are really looking forward to working with more people towards climate action. We're going to start today with a land acknowledgement. And also something that I've learned about land acknowledgements from Amber Starks. If you want to look up her work, she does so much work towards Black and Indigenous liberation online. She goes as Melon and Muskoke. She says, when offering a land acknowledgement, that acknowledgement should also include at least one tangible step towards returning the land. So if there's something you can take away from this session today, I hope it is this. Basically, whenever there is a land acknowledgement happening, to just raise your hand or wherever you are, speak up and say, hey, since we're here talking about acknowledging the land, how about we do something all together as well? So that's actually what we're going to do right now. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Fairy Creek. So just to explain a little bit, I don't know, you might have heard this a little bit about this already. There was a viral photo of a giant old growth log on a truck that went around this past summer. But basically, Fairy Creek is what the ongoing land defense to protect old growth forests on unceded Paktidat and Dididat territory is called. And this is on the island. So as I know, some of you might know, considering you're here today, we are in a climate and biodiversity crisis. Only 2.7% of BC's original protective old growth forests remain. And by the hundreds of thousands of hectares that they continue to be cut down, it will not last that much longer. So the thing about this Fairy Creek blockade is that it is incredibly effective. So when we're talking about Indigenous resistance and land defense and what it actually does, Indigenous resistance has stopped or delayed greenhouse gas pollution equivalent to at least 1/4 of the annual US and Canadian emissions. So this is according to a 2021 study. That's incredible, right? We need to be actually actively working in solidarity and supporting people on the front lines, Indigenous land defenders and allies. So how we're going to do that today, very recently, a call to action was made by Fairy Creek to call the Governor General of Canada, Mary Simon, and ask her to meet with Elder Bill Jones to discuss the protection of all old growth on Paktidat territory. So we're going to do that together today. I know this might make some people a little bit nervous if you've never made a call before. Also, I know there are some people listening to the recording. So hi, you can absolutely make it here as well, even if it's after hours. There are voicemails. But it's actually a lot more low stakes than it might seem. Quite frankly, even if you are calling during office hours, you'll often get a voicemail. And if you don't, all you have to do is just make the demand. You don't have to worry about too much else. Just say what you want to say. And if that's all you get out, that's totally fine. So here we have the actual script. I realize now that the number is on the other screen. So I'm going to ask everyone to first put in the number on your phones. So grab your cellular devices. I'm going to do it as well. And put in the 1-800 number. Apologies, folks. I guess this number does not, in fact, have a voicemail. So I'm actually just going to say it very simply, though, what you would say, just so we have that on the recording and for folks who want to do this in the future. So basically, all you would say is, hi, my name is blank, and I am calling to demand an end to all old growth logging now. This includes a return of unceded lands to Indigenous peoples, conservation financing for Indigenous nations, a ban on raw log timber exports, and a just transition away from old growth and clear-cut logging. This is really important to me because if you want to add something like that, and if you leave your number, that would be great as well. So my number is this, and you can also just let them know your postal code, so kind of whereabouts you are. And then you say, thank you very much for your time. I hope to hear back from you. And that's all. That's pretty much a call to your government. That's it. So with that, I just want to acknowledge the fact that I am working and living on Musqueam territory, who were here long before I ever came to this land, and who will be here for generations to come, who are the original caretakers of this land and the rightful stewards of this land. So moving on from there, Wei, take it away.
So some of you might have heard that this was supposed to be a debate. So what had happened? What happened was the Liberal and Conservative candidates actually refused to participate in this debate, even though we offered them to have a surrogate represent the candidate. Sean is the only one that very much committed to this discussion from the very beginning. This is still a nonpartisan event, but we still decided to invite Sean so that he can share his skills and expertise in simply how to create climate action. The politicians, or at least most of them, don't seem to care, so we'll have to make them care. And that's why we're here. And really, this is just a few of us, a few of our efforts in the Vancouver South riding to build a sustained climate action as a community. That's really what we're trying to do here. So we have several polls to get you started, to get all of us started on thinking about how we want to go about this and what holds us back. So the first one is on why do you want climate justice?
All right. I'm going to show the results now. So very clearly, everybody is very aware of the generations after us. That makes a lot of sense. I agree wholeheartedly. And I'm glad people have their priorities, that Indigenous rights and sovereignty are at the top of the list after that. And disability rights as well. I know I myself fall into that category and am concerned for myself and my community. And workers' rights, absolutely. The rights of the people living in Global South. And reconnection to our humanity also has quite a few votes. I agree wholeheartedly with that as well. Restoring our relationship with the land and with non-human animals, and of course with each other. So moving on from there, I did have an other option here as well, which nobody took me up on, which is fine. But if you do have any other thoughts, ways that you yourself are personally invested in climate justice for you, for your communities, if anybody would like to speak up on that, this is an open floor. I hope that we can also continue that throughout the meeting. It's quite an open forum. So just raise your hand, write in the chat if you want to sort of stay anonymous, and go for it.
Well, Tom wrote, the climate emergency is the most pressing existential threat we face. So definitely speaking to the first option. Were you all not able to see the
I think results? I will do better next time. I might have taken them away too quickly or something. I'll see if I'll check in next time for our next poll. Sorry about that.
Okay, the next question that we'd like to ask everyone is, what holds you back from participating in climate action?
All right, with that, we shall end the poll. Now, can you see the results here? Give me a thumbs up or nod. Fantastic. Yes, so as you can see, a lot of people have said, I don't know what works or how to actually make change. So really thinking about the effectiveness, where do I want to spend my energy and what actually is going to make this happen? And then also, I don't know where to start or what to do. which is also very real. Just literally not knowing, there's so many different directions that we're all pulled in. So it's hard to figure out what to do and where to start. I do also see in the chat, Michelle, I picked other because I am involved in energy transition on a global scale. We also need to talk about the environment crisis. It is not just about the climate. So I think that's a really great point, Michelle. And I wonder if you would maybe like to expand on that and would also like to talk about energy transition on a global scale.
Let me see. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Hi. Okay, so my name is Michelle Molyneux, and I actually work in high tech here in Vancouver, and we do big data analytics for the Fortune 500 globally. And so most of our customers are the energy companies, Chevron, Exxon, and so forth, as well as all of a lot of the renewable energy companies as well. So when you're talking about energy transition, it's fine for you to say, let's omit fossil fuels and get rid of fossil fuels. It's easier said than done. Right now, what's happening is everyone's talking about LNG. Well, China is buying up LNG so much that in Europe, when they were doing a downward trend in coal mining, LNG is now hard to come by. It's become very expensive. And in Europe and in Germany, for an example, coal mining has gone up 38%. So when you're trying to say you want to do energy transition, it has a lot of other negative effects, especially globally. There's not enough. You talk about renewable energy, you talk about solar, you talk about wind energy. Well, guess what? You need metals for that. So the mining industry has gone up. So there's an energy environmental crisis there. When you talk about eliminating fossil fuels, that's petrochemical. Well, yes, you want to get rid of plastics, but guess what? In the hospitals, they depend on plastics for syringes. So what other alternatives are you going to look at when you want to get rid of fossil fuels or petrochemicals? And not only that, on a global scale, I mean, a lot of the developing nations are so dependent on fossil fuels, they don't have the financial, government, regulatory, or any kind of support to do the energy transition. So it is the developed nations that actually has to help them and guide them in helping them do the energy transition and looking for alternative resources. And guess what? Some of the alternative resources, maybe some environmentalists may not like it. There are some other solutions, like for an alternative, there's a thing called green ammonia, which can be a bit explosive, but green ammonia is being looked at to replace fuel for ships and jet fuel. There's also green hydrogen that's being looked at. So all of these energy companies right now, where they're being vilified without really taking a hard look at what they're doing, they are really busy in doing energy transition. BP has completely done a 180 degree and everything is focused on renewable and green energy. And all of the other companies are doing that as well. And so I think that when it comes to the energy transition side of things, that people need to take a harder look at what is being done and have a more realistic approach, because it's going to take a long time. It's not going to happen overnight. There's not enough resources for renewable energy. So we have to have a balance there. So that's me on my side looking at it on the global scale. I'm actually putting on a conference, a virtual conference next month on energy transition. And what is the, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the reality of it all. So, and these are some of the big issues that the energy companies are actually facing, and also big corporations as well, when it does come to energy transition. That has a ripple down effect to communities.
I'd love to connect with you on this.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I would like to say, I definitely would like to have others respond to what Michelle has just said in just a moment, but I just wanted to say thank you, Michelle. We really appreciate having your expertise and your skills and your experience and your knowledge. Yes, it's so important to especially think on the global scale because, of course, this is a global issue. And so is there anybody who would actually like to respond to what Michelle has said?
I mean, just to talk to Michelle about this a little bit, if I can, if no one else has anything to say.
Actually, we have Tom here.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, it's Marianne. I guess what I was going to say to Michelle is that's why there's a period of transition. And unfortunately, because there has been such a delay for 30 plus years in action, that we're running out of time. So now it's pretty panicky. And now they're talking about 60% reduction by 2030. But in the meantime, neither the province nor the country has reduced anything. But yes, so I think that people understand that it's a transition. But you've got to get working. You've got to get working ASAP. And it needs to be a huge collaborative effort for the common good. And that's like a huge paradigm shift. So that's all I have to say.
And we have Darcy. Darcy would like to say something.
Sure, I'll let Sean go. I'm just writing down some thoughts, so I'll let Sean go and then you can continue.
No, it's just talking to Michelle there. It's very interesting because when you are transitioning to these alternative energies, as you're saying, you're right. There are resources lacking, and alongside the resources that are lacking in, say, developing nations where we need to support transition, we need to recalculate how we even do our own emissions. How we calculate net zero locally is by paying offsets to other countries so that we can continue to have increasing emissions and still hit our goals, so to speak. And that's something where when we're looking at the global aspect of it, it's a very good point. We're starting to use up materials to allow us to transition in certain ways, but we have to look at the larger scale of things of, are we still encouraging it in other countries who will offset everything that we're doing here in the first place?
Yeah, no, I agree. I do absolutely agree. And there is a lot of collaboration that's going on, among all of the energy providers, among the regulators. Last month, sorry if you can hear my puppy, he's whining at me. I had one of the commissioners for FERC, which is the Federal Regulation Energy Commission, talk, and they've all agreed that there needs to be more done, and the government needs to step up even more. And I think Canada has not stepped up enough, not only to help the energy companies, because it's people's livelihood that has a negative impact here as well. Whole communities are impacted by this. So there's not enough that's being done there. There's not enough even being done on the local and on the municipal level. There's a lot of talk and there's a lot of fake action, and there's no real action, and that's what needs to be done. And so it's starting, and it is, and you're right, to the other lady, we've been needing to do this for a very, very long time. But yes, now there is that big panic that we need to hurry up and get this done. But I also wonder, if it's going to cause a bit of a burnout and everyone's going to start saying nothing's going to happen because nobody is communicating, nobody is collaborating, and nobody wants to really pay too much attention to the real issue of what's going on. So I'm going to mute because my dog is rolling around and rubbing his back here.
Can I just hop in real quick again before Darcy does? So with what Michelle's saying there, I agree entirely. And what I'm thinking needs to happen is a massive investment into the transition, because right now I'm from Alberta, full disclosure there. I grew up where oil and gas is your bread and butter, your king, but people aren't in love with oil and gas. They're in love with providing for their family. and it is the most viable way to provide for your family there. So if we do massive reinvestments into what we're doing here to transition in a faster way to provide equal or higher paying jobs, people are going to buy in a lot quicker. But that's going to take a lot of will and the conscious decision to do so. And right now, I think people are hoping industry is going to do it. We're hoping the government's going to do it. And I think we really need to pressure the government or elect a government that will do it in the first place. Otherwise, we're just going to keep getting this incrementalism until nothing happens.
Thank you. I really appreciate that back and forth. And I'm really glad we have this on recording for everybody who's watching at home. So thank you very much. Yeah, go for it, Darcy.
Yay, thank you so much. Yeah, so my name is Darcy. I'm with Climate Justice Victoria, and I was invited here from by Kai. So thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'll touch on that sort of idea of the complexities of a just transition and sort of bring it back to the poll question of kind of what holds you back from participating in climate action. Because I think regardless of whatever kind of tactic or issues we see as being kind of the main problems, I think we can agree that to some degree, there's things that hold us back in one way or another, or the movement as a whole in one way or another from kind of fully participating in that. Yeah, exactly. So when we're talking about green energies or alternative energies, obviously many of them are reliant on fossil fuel or traditionally dirty energy extraction, or things that actually exacerbate other inequalities. I'm sure some of you are aware of the explosion in purchases of Tesla vehicles and other electronic vehicles, and how that's led to mass inequality in the mining industry in many African nations. But sort of like question one, where we kind of got to pick what matters to us most, what struck me was actually how interweaved all of those answers were and how they kind of relate directly to each other. So, you know, when we're talking about workers' rights, we are looking at kind of healthy communities, like Sean was saying, and looking at our future generations and places where workers and families want to live. And when we're talking about Indigenous sovereignty and the overexploitation of the global South, that's actually tied directly into racism and colonial histories and current colonial practices. And so I think to some degree, and this is where it comes back to this question, is that can kind of make you feel frozen a bit, because it's like, where do I start? You know, it feels like it's this giant mountain and you don't know where to kind of put your foot first. There's no easy answer for that. I mean, if there was, we wouldn't be here tonight. We'd all be, you know, doing whatever the answer is that solves this problem. But I think one thing is actually having events like this, and some other topics I'll maybe talk to in the later question, but also kind of understanding that what you're doing isn't just to kind of prevent imminent disaster on an existential as well as a very real physical level. I think that can be in a way that leads to activity alarming in some cases for climate justice. You know, I'm sure we all know this. We only have 11 years left, or now I think because of COVID we lost some time, so it's 9 years left. Or you know, we read these IPCC reports that have a lot of kind of doom and gloom without too many solutions, except for, you know, well, I hope this upcoming UN climate conference will solve things, even though we've seen historically that isn't the case. I'll probably touch on some of this again later, but there's a quote that I kind of like that might spring up other discussion from Audre Lorde, who was a Black queer feminist spoken word and prose writer in the 60s and 80s and 70s, who has a really good quote I like. It says, "Tomorrow belongs to those of us who conceive it as belonging to everyone, who lend the best of ourselves to it, and with joy." And to me, what that means is we're involved in whatever political campaigns we are in. We're involved in climate justice or whatever it is, because not only do we want to prevent something terrible from happening or that is happening, but we actually together see us working together and see us building something stronger together. There's this kind of saying in improv comedy where it's, you know, it's the idea isn't that you're the star of the show, you're all the stars of the show, right? Because you're all doing something together that one person on their own couldn't do, right? So one person has a brick and someone else has a brick, and we all bring a brick, and then we've built a house together that we can all share together. Yeah, I'll just wrap it up there, but that kind of helps me kind of think about how I can get involved with climate action.
I see, yes. And also to end this as well, I just want to say Glenn's comment in the comments, it will hurt a whole lot less if it's funded by the billions that the feds and provinces are subsidizing the oil and gas industry. So I agree wholeheartedly with that as well, Glenn. And thank you, Darcy. And we have something from Sean. Yes.
Actually, I didn't actually touch on the poll. I was just talking to Michelle there before about what's holding people back from participating in climate action. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but right now people are struggling. People don't have their basic needs met. You know, housing is difficult to come by. You know, their difficulty having high wages enough to basically survive. And so having the energy and the wherewithal to focus on the climate, to focus on larger issues is really, really affected. What happens is when you have those stress things activated in your brain, sorry, I'm not using proper words here, it literally limits your ability to think about larger complex issues. And so right now, it's almost a privilege to be able to think about the climate, to be able to worry about the climate, to fight about it, because a lot of people can't even get to that point because their needs are just not being met. So I think the number one thing as we transition and trying to focus to having massive investment into doing this is to lift people out of poverty simultaneously. I think it's the only way that we're going to get a collective conscience to work on it. And I think that's what we need to do going forward.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that as well. Yes, and thank you everybody who's responded so eloquently to this, and it's so clear how much everybody cares, and even in this conversation, it's so clear how important all of our voices are. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're going to be moving on. So I just wanted to speak briefly when it comes to what holds us back. I myself know that for me, sometimes, you know, some of these actions that we're called to, you know, by Indigenous peoples of this land, and in general, you know, things that we might have to sacrifice for climate action, you know, our time, our money, our energy, our comfort. It is incredibly difficult sometimes. So I actually just wanted to highlight Fairy Creek just a little bit further, because this is one of the biggest protests of our history, and really land defense of our history. It's beyond protest, it's actually defending the land. And so I think it's really important that we actually discuss it, considering the media hasn't discussed it very much. So I have actually gone up to Fairy Creek, and I have stayed there as well overnight. And I just want to talk a little bit about, you know, what that's like, and moments that you kind of are like, wait, I could go do this, right? I have the privilege of being, you know, maybe middle class, and my job is pretty flexible, and I could actually go up and stay a few nights and actually stand on guard for people who've probably been there for a long time. Or, you know what, I do have a bit of money to spare. I could totally put some money into the legal defense fund, or you know, even just, yeah, I could show up at this protest that's happening in solidarity with the Pakidat and Dididat peoples and with the indigenous land defenders on the land. But man, there's all these other things, or I'm not so sure, what if I get arrested, or, you know, and to that, I just want to talk about my experience. So I went up with my partner. I think that's the number one, going with people, you know, quite frankly, too, as somebody who reads as woman, it's a little bit more dangerous. I'm still white, so there's pretty much a huge level of safety there. I'm going to be real. There's a lot of discrimination and racism and violence against Indigenous and Black and people of color happening all up there right now. So be aware of that. But, you know, I'm still aware that I should have a certain level of protection, and that's necessary for me. So I brought my partner, who reads as a man, and we went together. We went in community. We had a plan. We had good food. We had good music. We talked it out together about what we're nervous about we made a plan together of what we're willing to do. So I said I was willing to be arrestable and my partner was not. So my partner was going to be the person to basically stand on the side and make sure that I was going to be okay. When you get there, there are so many people telling you exactly what is necessary for you to live, to sleep, to eat, and to be in community. I will also say there are things that have changed even since I've been up there. There's a lot more RCMP presence right now, and they're actually funding it even more, which is a whole other conversation that we could have. Abolish the police. But there is also, from what I understand, still an opportunity and possibility that you can do jobs where you are not arrestable. So if for whatever reason that is not something that you are comfortable with, or it's something that you really can do, be aware that you can go up to many of the blockades and be able to do jobs that are not arrestable. So they really need people right now. We're going to try to get back as soon as we can. And I'm just here to say, if there's something holding you back, if it's something that I mentioned on the list or something else, find your way. There was a really amazing time that we had there while in the midst of being, a really hard time. And I don't want to stop going, and I don't regret going. And I am so grateful to the people who are staying up there. And I just want to say, it's going to be hard sometimes. And also there is such a great reward. And when we're talking about reconnecting to our humanity, Berry Creek is that personified. So that's just what I wanted to say about this question.
Thanks so much, Kai. Actually, I wanted to speak to what Michelle spoke of earlier. I have to admit there was so much expertise that you spoke of there that I honestly, do not understand. I'm not in that world. I'm not in the innovation of all these green technologies, because I'm just a regular citizen. And it would be a different case if that's the debate that the politicians are having. If it would be a different case if all the leaders are discussing the difficulties of this transition, just as you did, Michelle. But unfortunately, a lot of them won't even show up to this debate. That's why we're having this dialogue. That's why this dialogue is not about how to transition. It's about how to push the government to transition, because we need them to care. Mm-hmm. I was reading Ibram Kendi's book on anti-racist theory, and he has a really interesting idea that it's not racists that make racist policies, but that racist policies make racist. This is very similar to what Sean was mentioning earlier. And I believe it's the same thing with climate change. It's not anti-climate people that intentionally desires anti-climate policy. It's that we have anti-climate policies that continues to fund gas and oil, just as Sean said. So people depend on it. And of course, they don't want to push forward. We need government. We need governmental leadership to take that leap of faith. And we need to create the critical mass to allow them to take that leap of faith. So if anything, what you said, Michelle, makes this even more pressing, makes this discussion even more necessary on how to pressure our government even harder.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with you 100%.
Thank you, Michelle.
Ashton, you have your hands up. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you for letting me talk. I'm just kind of listening to everyone, and I just want to share like some thoughts, like just to add to the discussion. Maybe there's something that I may not be aware of. I'm just, reflecting on, our government leaders, whether it's NDP or the Green Party, which, in their lead up to the election, in the last election, they said that they didn't support the pipelines. And when they got elected together, Green Party and NDP, lo and behold, we got a pipeline from John Horgan, and so I'm kind of questioning why that happened. And I messaged Melanie Mark, who's an Indigenous person. I'm an Indigenous person, and she's like the only person that I know that's Indigenous that works in the government, like provincially. And so I messaged her, and I brought it up. I probably a month ago. I still haven't got a message back, but the first idea that comes to my mind is that like a lot of these government people that work in the government that are representing us in each province, like they have these people with the money that are holding them by the strings, like multinational oil companies, and it's structurally, set up in such a way that through the laws and those different factors that, kind of, are what's causing us to be in the situation that we're in, right? And and I think, when you go through a process like, okay, we want to do climate, action for climate change, and you have to go through this process through the government, submit paperwork, and and that takes time, and who knows how long that would take. And like, what can you do, right? Like, we all know that we have to like protect the waters, with the fish and all this stuff, for us to like, eat food, and and the climate, so that we can eat from the land and stuff like that. But at the same time, we like the convenience of how we're living right now. We like to go like order things from online, and we like to go travel places, go travel to another parts of the world. And cumulatively, that has like a effect on the climate, with the airplanes, with their emissions, with the with the, I guess, construction, the cars, and like you said, there was limited resources. And I don't know, it just seems like at some point, like the structure of how we live has to change. And yeah, we have to like listen to what the IPCC report recommendations has laid out, and like one person said, it's been like at least 30 plus years, and so far nothing has been done, and like like the people in the government, NDP, like I don't know, like, to be honest, I don't know too much of the terminology of the government, with regards to like you guys, I don't know if it's like you guys are like a different kind of party, like running for the election, to be elected. And yeah, but anyways, like if you ask, I don't know, it's kind of tough, Green Party, NDP, like, you think those people like are not in support of the pipeline? But like, look, we have the pipeline, and people are protesting, and at the same time, we're kind of scared to even go protest because this police gonna come and arrest us and give us like headaches to go through a process, and like not getting criminally charged. And we have like, responsibilities to like, not get criminal record. And like, how do you think we feel like going through that? You know what I mean? Like mentally, like holistically, like that'll make someone sick, you know what I mean? And like mental effects through physical effects. And that's how they kind of like break down the people, like, it's like an artistic kind of creative breakdown of the people, and yeah, that's, I don't know, that's what's on my mind right now. Just there's probably other details, we can probably take from other countries that are doing things that are working. But yeah, I don't know. like the mining from the other countries, like Canada is involved in. The news doesn't share this. You know, a lot of people don't know about this. You know, Canada working together with the United States and extracting, you know, mining from other countries, you know, and all that contributes to, you know, global warming, I guess, you know. And yeah, but a lot of this stuff isn't shared on the media, and but it's to like how we're living the structures, like to, you know, make the money, right, and to kind of to, you know, add to the economy and for people to keep doing what they like to do, you know, the convenience of how we're living, you know, how a nice style of life. And but all that comes at a price, right? And it's like for many years we've been doing this kind of thing, and the world is like starting to like feel it. We're all starting to feel it, you know what I mean? And if we keep going at this rate, you know, I don't know how long, you know, this planet can sustain that, you know what I mean? It's just gonna reach some point. And I don't know, it's projected that from a MIT scientist that, I don't know, between 2040 and 2050, like, I don't know, it's that's what they said. I'm just a messenger that, like, you know, I don't know what the exact words are. It's like civilization is going to kind of end somewhere between there. And given the wildfires we're seeing just in 2021, you know, and it's kind of crazy with the heat, and it's different. It's not like 2000 or something like that, you know. Yeah, or 1993. All right, that's all for right now.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks so much for sharing that. That's a lot of heavy. I'm sure that weighs so heavily on your mind and on your life. So thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Darcy, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll lower my hand. Oh, you did. Yeah, and I think Ashton really nailed the nail on the head there. I think kind of questioning like what is the issue? Is it an issue of scarcity? Is there a very finite amount of you know, raw material in the world? Or is it a question of distribution? Is there enough, you know, of whatever it is in the world? We just need a different way of spreading it out and kind of getting it to where it needs to go, and kind of addressing that as well. But also, I think really pointing out, you know, that sometimes, you know, we can have the politician at the front of the room, but it's really the companies in the back kind of leading the way. And I think specifically oil and gas companies, they carry about $18 trillion worth of stock equity, which is about like a quarter or so of the global stock market. So what they have to say carries a lot of weight in terms of kind of electoral politics. And yeah, and Ashton also raised a great point kind of around, you know, the parliamentary road to change, and, you know, is that enough? Do we need more? And the way you can kind of look at it is that elections are sort of, you're using a hill to address a crowd, right? You have an incredible platform as a politician, or as, you know, someone running for politics, because you're doing so in a way that's sort of legitimized by the state. So you're kind of given a platform that many don't have access to. But then on that same hand, you kind of have to ask certain questions, you know, when you're on that hill as a politician, do the answers you raise, are they addressing the concerns of the crowd kind of thing, or are you using that for good? And I don't think it's necessarily a case of, oh, we have, you know, the wrong people elected now because they're snidely whiplash people or whatever. And if only we could elect the right people, you know, we would find a better way. I think that kind of discounts the role that movements play in social justice. However, I do think that kind of raising and asking more during elections of our politicians and saying you're listening to us. Well, here's what we're demanding. What do you say to this? You know, I think it was Jeremy Corbyn when he was running for Labour in the UK. He was standing, giving a speech to kind of, I think they were called the mixed strikers. There was a wave of strikers going around the UK to unionize McDonald's. And he was making these promises saying, you know, when I'm elected, XYZ, here's what will change. But he says, don't wait for me. You know, don't wait for me. Keep at this, because whether I get in, whether I don't, what really matters here is what you're on the ground saying. And so keep doing that. And I think as well, that's kind of what I took away from what Ashton had to say, is kind of questioning these different kind of roads to change, or actors of change, and where do we fit into that as well.
Thank you, Darcy. Yes. And Sean?
Yeah, no, I just want to talk a little bit on what Ashton had to say there. So I'm in a union, and I've learned from being in a union, you are, you know, there's strength in numbers, but also what I've learned from being in a union is, you know, you have to really pick and choose your people, because with any group of people, there's going to be people who are pushing for the right things, and there's going to be people who are not. And so when I look to different elected officials, I look to a lot of different examples that I respect, like Matthew Green in Hamilton Center, or Leah Gazin in Winnipeg Center. I've had town halls with them on affordability and UBI and capitalism as a whole. And so what Ashton's saying here, you know, like we've got this constant growth as a requirement in corporate law. You know, you have to show profits to shareholders. And that consistent growth means you're pulling it out of different places. You're pulling it out of wages. You're pulling it out of sustainability. You're pulling out of all of these different places, so that wages are kept low. We've got wage suppression because all that stolen wages is now going into profit. And then we've got sustainable issues because they're going to do it the cheapest, most efficient way, not necessarily the way that is the best for Mother Earth. And this is where we have to start questioning, you know, where are we allowed to limit profit? Where are we allowed to start, mandating, hey, you can't start giving out these bonuses and dividends to all these select few unless you're doing X, Y, and Z. And I think that's the kind of legislation we need to start looking into, because right now what we have is not sustainable, and it is pressuring us to do things like continuing to build pipelines and continuing to do things that we know are not at the benefit of ourselves long terms. And I'm sure Ashton can agree. When I do anything, I try and think 7 generations ahead. What are we doing now that's going to affect 7 generations? I've got a 2.5-year-old and a 5-month-old in the next room, and I think, what kind of world do I want to leave for my kids? And so this is where I want to start pushing for things that have that, you know, that hard work, that long implemental change, instead of just going election cycle to election cycle saying, I'm going to promise X, Y, and Z. It's really about that long-term thinking and that hard, difficult work that nobody likes to talk about.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sean. It is absolutely, it's going to be hard. This is the mess that we've all found ourselves in, and it is going to take sacrifice, and that's just the reality. And I appreciate everything everyone has said. We're going to have Glenn speak, and then we are going to move on. It is in fact 8 o'clock. We were planning to just keep people here for an hour. That being said, you know, if people want to stick around, we are happy to stay as well and continue. So we're going to move on after this to our next items, but Glenn, go for it.
I want to talk about something that I think has a great deal to do with climate change. And it might seem fairly tangential at the beginning, but I will talk about it for a few minutes. And that is proportional representation. Proportional representation, well, let me see here. It says here on a little pamphlet I've got from Fair Vote Canada, it says, did your vote count? In New Zealand, which has proportional representation, in the election in 2020, 8.5% of the voters elected no one. In Canada in 2019, 52% of the people who voted elected no one. The idea that, I mean, I think that one of the reasons why we have so much difficulty in making progress on climate change is that we have governments that are elected with majorities of 38 to 42%. 38 to 42% of the people who vote is not a majority. Another thing that it necessitates frequently is strategic voting. You don't necessarily vote for the party that most closely supports your opinions and positions, but you want to have your vote count. And you often end up choosing the party that is least offensive rather than the one that you want. It also creates flip-flops from one set of climate change motivation policies to another, which is not good. The representation of all major parties from all areas of the country is very possible with proportional representation. You don't get, I'm not sure if this is 100% accurate, but no liberals voted in Alberta, or very few. I believe that with a proportional voting system, we will be able to make progress on climate change policies much easier, and they will last much longer than with the first past the post system. And we have to stop electing parties, prime ministers, who promise that the next election will be the last first past the post election in Canada, and then does everything that he has to make sure that he never has to live up to that promise. This is the underpinning policy that I believe is necessary to be able to make substantial progress on climate change. If we do not elect a majority government in this election, I hope that whoever has to support the government to allow it to do what governments do will absolutely insist that proportional representation is the first thing that has to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Mhm.
Also, I just want to add to that with something that David said in the chat, which goes right along with what you were saying of contractual obligations left over from previous administrations. So the government and federal and provincial can be sued by those companies for ridiculous sums of money. And an example of that is literally at Fairy Creek right now. So the Liberals were here before and they privatized the land. They gave it, well, they leased it over to Teal Jones, but this basically means that if the NDP government here, which would like to do something, actually does anything, they will be sued billions of dollars, which I'm just going to bring it right back to Fairy Creek, which is why people on the front lines, actually putting their bodies on the front lines, is our last stand, is the only thing we can do in those circumstances and situations. So thank you so much, Glenn, for that. We are going to have to move on. I'm really appreciating everybody's thoughts, and yeah, so much gratitude to everybody who's speaking up. We are going to be skipping over some things because we, I'm so grateful for how many people are willing to speak up and share their perspective, because that's the only way we can move forward. As we know, we're only going to be able to do this with more people and people recognizing their power. When we're talking about these systems of the government that are clearly doing everything in their power to ensure that we feel like we don't have any, that is actually just not even true. When we start to understand that building collective movements, that are going to be difficult, just like Sean brought up, of building a union doesn't necessarily mean all your problems are solved. It just means that now you have strength in numbers, right? We can actually build these things that we're talking about here beyond the systems of government that right now are holding us back. So with that, there is a question here for everybody moving forward. I am actually not going to make it a poll because there were so many things discussed today. And so I actually just want to give everybody a moment to reflect. What is one action? Just one. It can be within your capacity, within your ability. What is one action you can commit to beyond this meeting? And it can be talking to somebody. That's an example. Just sharing with somebody about this meeting, what you learned today. Maybe even sharing with them the recording, which we will be sending out. That is an example. It can be calling your MP for maybe the first time, right? Actually starting that relationship, because we still have to have those relationships. It can be, talking at a hearing, talking maybe to a community of yours, your faith-based institution, for example. Just think of one action and either write it in the chat or say it out loud. You can raise your hand and say it out loud. What are you committing to moving away from this meeting? Go for it.
I have to say that, again, I'm so grateful for the direction of this meeting and where I ended up going, because I felt it was a very important discussion. But for me personally, just like Kai mentioned, I didn't start getting involved until very recently. I used to be a lot more politically inclined, but took a break to focus on my career. Selfish, but it happens. And one thing that got me back, or I should say one thing that kept me from political participation, was the fact that I was thinking of it as an individual. The fact that I noticed that so much of social change discussions is focused on the individual, even if it's the most well-intended ones, whether it's podcasts or books. It's about what you can do. And I know that we also frame this question in this way, but for me, one of the important intentions behind this gathering is to build a sense that we're all trying to do this together as a community, and that for me, I just feel like that I feel much less alone and much less powerless when I know that all of you are trying to do this as well. And I think it would be so much more powerful if we continue to have these discussions and find solutions together and commit to them and enact them together. So that's what I wanted to say, prefacing this question. And Sean, you oh, by the way, I think at this point we are 10 minutes over our time. We're gonna end this kind of ungracefully, but this will be the end. And like Kai said, you're welcome to stay, and we're welcome to discuss with us if you like to. I saw that Sean had his hand up, so Sean, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding for any of this kind of activism, what we're doing here is we need to stick to our strengths. We need to organize our skills. So if you're an accountant, I want you starting to go through your union, your group's investments, and find out where you can no longer invest in companies that are polluting, where you can no longer actively do change like that. If you're an organizer, how do you organize people and get them into a position where they can use their voices effectively? Protests are great. I think there's a lot of merit in protests, but I'm finding each individual's specific skills can be positively weaponized into making sure that we are working with those. And by organizing people into those skill sets, into those things, we can have actionable things for people to follow. And I think when I want to go forward, it's like, what are the actions? What small chunks can we break this down into? Because right now, when we're protesting, we effectively want to put it in the government's hands. But as we've seen, they're not always the best to be trusted with this. So we need to start making roadmaps for people to follow and organizing people down those paths. And I think that's the best thing you can do going forward.
Absolutely, Sean. Actually, you know what? For the people who are still willing, and thank you so much for so many of you sticking around. That's incredible. We really appreciate you. We are actually going to just segue right into something we were going to mention before, because Sean, you brought it up so brilliantly. What are those small actions that bring us together, that go right to the government, but that also really build our individual and collective power? So here we go. Want to go for it, Wei?
Sure. Yeah. So just as you said, Sean, what are our strengths and what are our skills? And I'm an artist by trade. I'm a storyboard artist. So I have this idea. I basically illustrated some of this image that some of you have seen, and I would like to do a series of them and turn them into postcards. And for anyone here who would like some, I will send it to you if you want to give me your mailing address, or if you're willing to come to a park, we can do that all together. Ideally, this is my fantasy. This is my vision, is maybe using 350.org or Lead Now to work with them, and at gatherings or protests or rallies, we will have stations where people can come and sign these postcards. We'll hang them up to share so that everyone can read, probably a lot of the things that you all have to say about what is important, that we all discuss in terms of what was important. And then we take all of them from each city and send them all to Ottawa and string them all in front of the parliament. I'm interested in finding kind of unique ways to protest, for lack of better word, because I think that most likely can get more media attention. So that's what I'm trying to work on.
Thank you so much, Wei. Yeah, I know I myself am very excited about this idea. I think it's a really easy way to get people involved, and also allow people to actually have their voice heard, and all of our voices together, if we can string them up and be able to read them together as well. And I also just, when it comes to this idea specifically, love that the collective memory of postcards that brings up for all of us. Something that we really want, that really brings us together, that is maybe feels a little obsolete, but that we can kind of rectify as a collective. And I think that's really beautiful. So with that, we will absolutely send this recording out to you and can absolutely keep you posted, pun now fully intended, on this campaign. And thank you, Darcy, for bringing up that you would be willing to share and put those with the Table of Climate Justice Victoria. That's how things like this start. So thank you. Mm-hmm. One last thing we do want to say is just sharing a quote by Autumn Peltier, who is a water protector, a young Indigenous water protector doing so much work for climate justice. And she says, "Mother Earth has been in existence for billions of years. She doesn't need us, we need her." And I think that understanding of our relationship to the land is what will change the world. And one more thing, because I think something Darcy brought up in the chat is so helpful. I know we talked about a lot of really distressing, traumatizing, and painful realities. And when I'm doing this work myself, when we're talking about things that keep us going, literally, I was just doing it today when I was preparing for this call, this amazing discussion we've had, where I was just like, oh my gosh, the planet is burning. It is literally on fire. That's not a metaphor. Like, we're all going to die, and that might that might be a reality. Oh my gosh, I got into that mindset. And when that happens, I literally just close my eyes. And if you want to do it with me now too, go for it. And I breathe. And I just spend a minute or two in my dream space, where I see and feel and hear what a world of climate justice looks like, feels like, sounds like, is like with each other. And when I know that I can imagine it, that it's in my body right now, I open my eyes back up and keep working to make it happen. So I appreciate everybody so much. We both do. Thank you so much for coming to this. And moving forward, we hope to stay in touch, to keep building community together, keep inspiring each other, and keep building towards climate justice in our actions in everyday life. I'm seeing lots of thank yous in the chat. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody. We'll see you later.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.